Hello and welcome to the 2022 Norwegian UK Seafood Summit. And this year we were hoping to welcome all of you to Fishmongers Hall in London, but unfortunately once again we had to do this digital because of the challenging times with the COVID virus, both in Norway and here in the United Kingdom. So this year, I welcome you to our Seafood Summit from the old and traditional Billingsgate Seafood Market here in Canary Wharf in London. As you saw from the introduction film, Norwegian seafood exports to the United Kingdom has done well during 2021. And especially our friends in retail and fish and chips has done well. We have seen that UK families has eaten a lot at home and also chosen seafood as a part of their diet with periods of lockdown, homeschooling, home officing, and general advice on to stay at home. And we've also seen that our friends in the fish and chip industry has done well. And they have also, this last year, innovated with home delivery, click and collect, and other innovations that has made them closer to their customers. We know that many of our friends in the restaurant industry has also had a challenging year last year, but hopefully we're now seeing an end to this, and we will, as the seafood industry, hopefully come stronger out of this. And we know that seafood must be an important part of the diet in the future. It is one of the most healthy and sustainable foods that we can get, and we're happy that the UK government has laid a strategy to increase the seafood consumption in the United Kingdom. And from the Norwegian side, we will continue to deliver healthy and sustainable seafood to the tables of the British consumers. So, as an inspiration to that, I will take you today through Billingsgate Seafood Market and talk with some of the traders here and with one of the best guides we can have, CJ Jackson from Billingsgate Seafood School. So, CJ, what can you say about Billingsgate Seafood Market?
Okay, well, the market starts trading at 4, and I would say anybody mad enough to get up at 3. And normally, you've got the fishmongers who are, have the independent retailers. You also get catering supply companies that are just coming back into their own now, having gone through this pandemic. You get the fish fryers, you get all the big commercial buyers, and then as soon as it gets a little bit into 6:30, you're going to get members of the public turning up. You are going to get a huge range of product here. It's the largest inland fish market in the UK, but it's global. Last night we had about 83 tons of fish coming in. The fish was unloaded at 2 or 3 this morning, and then the merchants get themselves set up to sell for the day. So it's busy.
We know that London is probably one of the most international cities in the world.
But it's interesting because if you look up and down the corridors and the aisles here, it's a huge range of ethnicity in London, and this market here is to cater for that ethnicity. I'm just admiring a really nice farmed halibut, which is Norwegian, right
Norwegian
in here.
Halibut here, some salmon.
Some Norwegian salmon.
Yeah.
And I've worked on this market for 17 years and I still get excited about a really fresh fish.
you have consumers coming in at the seafood school to learn more about how to cook seafood,
Yep.
but also probably how to cook with species they don't know well from before.
Well, you've got the top 5, which are cod, haddock, salmon, tuna and prawns. And people at home are fairly confident about that. But one thing that we have a huge issue with in the UK, people feel underconfident about how to cook it well. And I would say a lot of people overdo it. The amount of people that come into school and I say, you've got a nice piece of salmon tail here, that's going to take you 6 minutes in the oven. And they go, oh, I'd normally cook that for 20. So we're always trying to get people to cook fish properly.
How is important is sustainability, both for the traders that are here on the market, but also for those that come in and buy seafood?
Well, I think that a lot of the members of the public rely on the person they're buying fish from for sustainability. It's always been quite low in people's understanding. They're expecting that person to know where the product comes from. From the grassroots up, from the ocean up, the person who's harvesting it should have a good understanding of what they're harvesting. Storytelling is such an important thing, where the product comes from. And because everything, you go into a supermarket, you go to a fish market, it's all cut for you. Here, the fish is whole. If it goes in and it's all portioned, you're losing the connection with where it's come from. So telling that story, I think, is really important. Okay, Hans Froder, this is Paul. He is the salmon buyer for J. Bennett. So he is, in my mind, the most knowledgeable man about salmon on the market. We had a fabulous trip to Norway a few years ago.
Yes, we did, yes.
And this very closed-in face sort of lit up when we saw all this salmon in the fjords in Norway. So what do you think about Norwegian salmon?
It's wonderful, Suja.
Thank you. Okay. How
And,
much do you deal with?
We deal with several thousand tonnes every year of Norwegian.
Yeah. What are your buyers asking you about sustainability?
There's very few people who are interested in sustainability, really. It's just price.
So they're relying it from, they're buying it, so they're relying on the person who's processed it to be able to give that story. But it is, the whole market's driven by price. So if the price is too high, they won't bring it in because they won't be able to sell it on.
So then let me give the word to the CEO of the Norwegian Seafood Council, Renate Larsen.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Hans. Dear seafood friends, another year, another digital gathering. I'm so sorry not to be able to see you all face to face in London. I really hope that we are on the path for brighter times and return to more normal ways of interacting and networking with each other. That said, the seafood industry has proven extremely resilient and agile throughout the pandemic. It is inspiring to see how the entire seafood industry, be it in production, logistic, retail, and marketing, have adapted to new realities and changing consumer demands in, frankly, quite astonishing ways. The most important message is that the Norwegian seafood industry is a force to be reckoned with, not just when it comes to seafood, but as a player in the greater picture of food and the future of our diets. It cannot be said often enough. Seafood is part of the solution, and we have a responsibility as an industry, producers, processors, distributors, retailers, and marketeers alike, to ensure sustainable seafood is not overlooked nor undervalued in the debate about the future of food. The growing body of evidence supporting the need for increased production and consumption of sustainable food from the ocean is clear. A UN report from 2019 concluded that if managed sustainably, our ocean should provide over 6 times more food than it does today. More recently, the Blue Food Assessment argued the critical role of seafood in achieving sustainable future food systems. The series of peer-reviewed scientific papers published in Nature last autumn addressed several aspects of food from our ocean, bringing together the expert of more than 100 leading researchers from more than 25 global universities and scientific institutes. According to the UN, aquaculture represents by far the biggest potential for sustainable growth in global food supply. The Color Fair Index that annually ranks the world's biggest protein producers relatively to sustainability have ranked Norwegian aquaculture companies at the top ahead of the other global food giants for 4 consecutive years. This is perhaps a bit contradictory to part of the public opinions, proving we still have a job to do to change the narrative and help educate consumers to see how responsible aquaculture and well-managed wild fisheries are part of the solution to future food supply and not the problem. The Norwegian Seafood Council is the largest and longest-running generic marketing organization for seafood, and to us it is essential to keep our fingers on the pulse of the seafood consumers. What drives their decisions and how various factors affect their opinions. Every year we compile these insights across more than 30,000 people in 25 markets, the largest seafood consumer insight of its kind. And we can see that sustainability and the close linked health drivers are pushing as potential sea change for seafood. Consumers around the world have different needs, but if we look at them together, a meal must meet the following requirements. It must taste good, be easy to prepare, provide value for money, and be sustainable for body and planet. Seafood largely delivers on all these drivers, and we see that health, wellness, and sustainability have increased in importance for consumers. During the pandemic, we have seen shifts in how and where seafood is consumed, with more and more people cooking seafood and trying new recipes in their home. The younger generation is particularly concerned with sustainability, but consumers increasingly want more responsible choices that will be healthy for the planet, for themselves and their families, and society. Many are concerned about climate changes, the environment, and animal welfare. Sustainability is no longer something that is a marketing ploy or selling point. It is an absolute essential. But sustainability means different things to different people. We have a responsibility as a producer and consumers to understand that it is a constantly evolving, complex issue, one that goes beyond color code or a sticker. We know seafood can play a part of the solution, and the Norwegian seafood industry is wholehearted committed to being a positive force for change to more sustainable food system. Norwegian seafood is strong on sustainability today. However, being among the best today does not mean we do not seek to improve. Tougher demands will be made here too in the years to come. The sustainable management, production and development of the seafood industry is an area where we must ensure continued leadership. This will require focus and both the will and the ability to make substantial changes and investments. We are seeing an increasingly focus on food and food systems, and the evidence is there. Top researchers are asking the world to eat more seafood. However, seafood is often overlooked, and the debate is dominated by a very polarized battle for attention between vegetarians and meat lovers. But it is not only in the media where we, as an industry, have to work on speaking up for seafood. To illustrate the challenge ahead of us, consider the fact that England's National Food Strategy, published last year, failed to mention the role that seafood can play in addressing the pressure on the food system, the environment, and of course the health. Not one word in this vital important document. How is that possible in a nation where fish and chips are part of the national heritage and culture? This is just one example from the UK, but it is unfortunately something we see in most markets, including Norway. As seafood people, it is an important part of our mission to change this. Our growing world population needs to be fed, and the UK seafood sector is part of a vital global industry responding to this. Seafood provides around 3.3 billion people with almost 20% of their average per capita intake of animal protein. This has also been acknowledged in the recent Eat Lancet report, the first full scientific review of what constitutes a healthy diet from a sustainable food system. But seafood can play an important role in the flexitarian diet for those who want to reduce meat consumption without becoming vegan or vegetarian. My New Year's wish is that seafood in 2022 will be seriously recognized as a part of the solution to the climate and health challenges and will take its well-deserved place in the global arena. This is a wish I know the next speaker very much agrees with. It's a great pleasure to introduce to this digital podium the Norwegian Ministry of Fisheries and Ocean Policy, Bjørnar Selnes Skjæran.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by expressing my heartfelt gratitude for the invitation. I would have liked to be present in London, which was my plan. But as we all know by now, plans change quickly these days, and I am happy for the opportunity to participate digitally. Over centuries, Norway and Britain have developed close relations across a variety of sectors, including fisheries cooperation and market issues. Ensuring that these strong relations are upheld is an important priority for Norway. Therefore, I am pleased that Norway and the UK have taken important steps towards establishing a strong future relationship within the seafood sector. The free trade agreement our countries signed last year was the first milestone on our new path forward. The agreement will benefit Norwegian exporters of seafood, the British seafood industry, and British consumers. And it provides a framework to further develop the trade in seafood between our two countries. The tariff regime for seafood is somewhat improved compared to when the UK was a member of the EU. However, in the veterinary field, new import requirements for seafood to the UK will take effect on the 1st of November this year. In order to make the transition to the new import regime as smooth as possible, we have established a close dialogue between my ministry, the Norwegian Food Safety Authority, and DEFRA. In December last year, Norway and the UK agreed on the first bilateral fisheries agreement. Another milestone which I believe both countries will benefit greatly from, gaining mutual access to each other's waters and exchanging quotas for a number of species. And on the same note, I am also very pleased that we have been able to reach an understanding on the fisheries in the northern waters. This would give vessels from the UK predictability for their fishery for cod in the fisheries protection zone around Svalbard. At the same time, it will contribute to our sustainable management of the stocks in this area. Which brings me to my main message today: sustainability. It has three dimensions: social, economic, and environmental sustainability. It is not enough to be mindful of only one of these aspects. Rather, sustainability should be a cornerstone, a point of departure, which is a part of our history in Norway. We have been harvesting from the ocean since we settled here in the north, giving us considerable experience in sustainable fishing in a sustainable way of life. This principle of understanding the ocean in order to both harvest from it and protect it has guided modern Norwegian management of fisheries. We have implemented a comprehensive system of monitoring the stocks and the greater ecosystems, giving us the benefit of foresight and adaptability. The foundation of our management is knowledge. As Minister of Fisheries and Ocean Policy, I have great ambitions for our marine sector. The goal is to make even better use of the resources and opportunities offered by our long coast and the clean, cold waters. In order to increase the production of seafood, we must adopt an even smarter and greener, more adaptable and even more knowledge-based approach. When it comes to fisheries, we will continue to expand our toolkit in terms of knowledge-based management. More data, better analysis, and even better understanding will allow us to continue to harvest the resources while still maintaining the balance of the natural ecosystems. In terms of aquaculture, we will diversify and explore new species, implement a more circular economy where recycling and synergies comes into full play, and initiate a major push towards sustainable production of fish feed in Norway. The essence is that all the links in the value chain, from fish feed and catching to processing and transport, must become more sustainable. This brings me to a general point, which I have made top of my agenda. We need to look at our ocean-based industries as an integrated whole. Not only must fisheries and aquaculture exist side by side. In order to achieve true sustainability, they also have to interplay with the other marine and maritime industries. With a holistic approach, I firmly believe we can harvest even more from the ocean. And this will most likely be the key to a truly sustainable economy in the future. That is why we put such emphasis on research, innovation, and not least cooperation. We know that it is only by coordinating our policies internationally that we can reach our goals. To conclude, I am very satisfied and optimistic about the agreements we have reached with the UK, a key partner not just in terms of seafood trade, but also terms of the policies that ensure sustainable management of the oceans. My aim is to develop this partnership and broaden our cooperation in the years to come. Thank you for your attention.
At this conference, we are addressing seafood in a sustainable future. And we have asked Marcus Coleman, the CEO of Seafish, to give us Seafish's view on seafood's place in a sustainable future here in the United Kingdom. The Norwegian Seafood Council and Seafish are cooperating closely, and I'm very happy that Marcus will speak on behalf of Seafish.
Hello, Marcus Coleman here, the Chief Executive of Seafish in the UK. I'm here primarily to talk about climate change and the impact on the seafood supply chain. In the lead up to COP26 last year, Seafish launched an awareness campaign. We wanted to shine a light on the good work that's going on in the seafood sector in relation to climate change. We put together a short video as part of that campaign, and I thought I'd kick off my presentation today with a look at that video, sharing that with you. So let's take a look now. So you can see that the video I've just played you picks up on a number of the key points, but I just wanted to elaborate further and draw out some of the key issues through my presentation today. So let's take a look at my next slide. We will provide an overview of the climate change situation. We'll look at what climate change means for seafood. We'll then look at the ways in which businesses in the supply chain are adapting and mitigating against their contribution to climate change. And finally, I'll wrap up with an overview of some of the support that Seafish is providing for businesses in the UK. We know that climate change has become widely understood to be perhaps the biggest challenge facing the planet. There was a time when there was a degree of scepticism, but I think that has subsided, and natural disasters, weather events have all helped the general awareness raising that climate change is an issue, it is caused by man, and it is here for the duration. It is also linked with other global challenges. Feeding the planet is another significant challenge that we have to tackle. And climate change and feeding the planet are so closely intertwined that we can't separate them. We have to address both at the same time. We know that climate change is already having an impact around the world. Emissions continue to warm up the planet. Talk of temperature rises, sea level rises, a number of different environmental factors. And addressing climate change is going to take action by all concerned. It's going to take governments, but also local level and us as individuals. For example, 196 countries signed up to the Paris Agreement back in 2015, all signing up to reducing their emissions. In COP last year, there was some success, over 40 countries committing to phase out coal power, over 30 nations and 11 car manufacturers committing to getting their new vehicles to zero emissions by 2040. Lots of other commitments to provide funding for helping developing nations. And the two biggest carbon emitters, China and the US, have agreed to get together to spend more time thinking about how they can cut their emissions to keep global temperatures to that 1.5 degree increase. So let me move on to what this could all mean for the seafood sector. And meeting emissions targets requires changes across the supply chain. It could have a big impact on the way we catch, the way we transport, and who we sell our seafood to. So in the longer term, we could see the demand for a reduction in emissions affecting the way in which we fish. It could mean further restrictions on the fishing gears and the locations and the durations that we are allowed to fish. It might see a demand to change the way we transport seafood around the world. There's an awful lot of air freight goes on at the moment. We might be required to move to more sea freight options. We might find it more difficult to actually access the marketplace at all. And so we're going to need our carbon credentials to be improved so that investment and belief in our products can continue. And another related factor are the environmental impacts that climate change will inevitably bring. We're likely to see increased storminess and wave heights, and this will affect the way in which we can fish. Increased ocean temperatures will affect the distribution of fish stocks around the world. Increased terrestrial rainfall could cause flooding of land-based structures and the deterioration of water quality in nearshore areas. The potential further down the line for increased sea levels and increased extreme water levels will bring about an increased risk of flooding for those coastal communities whose livelihood depends on fishing. And finally, ocean acidification can very readily affect fish in low oxygen waters. It can even prevent the formation of shells on some shellfish. So let's talk a little bit about climate change mitigation. Seafood is starting from a good place. Compared to other meat proteins, seafood has really excellent carbon credentials. It really is the lowest of all of those. Beef, pork, chicken, it beats all of those with its carbon footprint. But that's not to say that the sector can be complacent. The sector must mitigate against providing further impetus and energy into climate change. And we call this climate change mitigation. It's important that businesses look at hotspots in their supply chains, and there are hotspots in the seafood supply chain, particularly around fuel usage in wild capture, and particularly in distribution of seafood products once they're caught and packaged and are being distributed to market. These are the places where we can make further gains. There are lots and lots of examples of businesses who are already making great steps forward, and I wanted, in the next part of my presentation, to showcase some of those businesses. The first of my case studies that I want to talk about, and by the way, all of these case studies are available on the Seafish website if you want to look in more detail at any of them. But my first has got a nice Norwegian connection, actually. In the UK, the launch has just happened of the first hybrid aquaculture vessel. Pleased to say that that's gone ahead. It's actually in collaboration with a Norwegian company. Ben Wilson is the managing director at Involusa, who are a UK company, but Ben has been across to Norway to look at the vessels that were being launched in Norway, and he's brought one of those vessels across, commissioned one of those to come across and start operating in the UK. So they've moved away from diesel only and gone to a diesel electric option, and it's certainly reducing their emissions quite considerably. In our second case study, I'm looking at Nomad Foods. Now, Nomad Foods, as we all know, are probably the largest European frozen seafood provider. Stuart Caborn there is their Chief Procurement Officer, and Stuart's telling me that the purpose at Nomad's Food these days is to serve the world with better food, and they really are on a mission to change their operations. They are aiming to have all Nomad factories powered by renewable sources in the very near future, and are on a mission to halve the waste that they create in their food production operations. They've also signed up to the Science Based Targets initiative. This puts them on a really credible path to emissions reductions. So all power to you guys at Nomad. My third case study is all about super frozen tuna. And there's a company here called the Fish Society. They are an online retailer of frozen seafood products, and they import super frozen tuna. Now, super frozen tuna is tuna that is frozen down to -60 degrees as soon as possible after it's caught. And this helps keep that very strong red colour that consumers like so much, rather than the browner effect that other freezing methods create. In doing so, they've cut their carbon footprint by 50% because they no longer have to air freight their tuna around the world. Instead, they can put it on sea freight, and it still makes the journey in a very strong quality product. My fourth case study is the catching sector in the UK, particularly the pelagic fishing fleet in Scotland. They are very busy looking at researching their carbon footprint. They were keen to understand how well they perform relative to other fishing methods and relative to other proteins. And so they've commissioned some research which has helped them identify such a low level of carbon footprint compared to other protein production. They've shown that it's about an 80th of the amount of carbon dioxide equivalent produced by catching a kilogram of pelagic fish compared to creating a kilogram of beef, for instance. So Ian Gatt and his colleagues up in Scotland there at the Pelagic Fishermen's Association doing a super job in terms of leading the way in Scotland. My next case study is back to fish and chips, actually. And this, I just put this one in because, first of all, Callum Richardson, the darling of the fish and chip industry, many of you will know him, a long-term champion of sustainability, and he is getting in on the act with further discussions within his fish and chip shop in Stonehaven in the northeast of Scotland, looking at how they can reduce their energy, reduce their food waste, and work more closely with suppliers to reduce the plastic waste and the carbon emissions that go with his operation. So again, hats off to you, Callum, for being a real leading light in the fish and chip sector, and just showing you that businesses large and small can make a contribution to climate change mitigation. So those examples that I've just run through, those case studies, as I say, they are available on our website. And thank you to all those companies who have allowed us to come and explore their businesses and shine a light on what they're doing. Those examples were all about mitigating climate change. But inevitably, climate change is going to have an impact on us, and we're going to have to adapt as well as mitigate. So I've got a couple of examples here where businesses are already finding that they're having to adapt to changing conditions through their environment and through their operating procedures. Now, the first one of these I wanted to talk a little bit about back to the pelagic sector in the northeast of Scotland. And what they have been experiencing, as other fishers will have as well, is an increased level of storminess, increased wave sizes, they are thinking. And so when they've been looking at making further changes to their vessels, they've been doing this with safety in mind. They are thinking that this is only going to get more extreme for them. And so in this particular example, they've been constructing an extra forward deck on some of their vessels to create a safe space for crew members from rogue waves coming over the top. The extra deck means that the ship has a higher freeboard, meaning that it provides further protection for the crew members working in that area. They've also moved their fish pumping systems from the side of the vessel to the rear of the vessel. And this has enabled them, while they're pumping, to maintain the bow pointing into the swell, which again creates a more stable position for the ship generally. And so these changes that are just, they're fairly significant changes, but they're changes that have needed to be thought about and input into their design. But it seems important to these bigger vessels to have considerations like that. We also think it's inevitable in terms of adapting to climate change that we're going to need to understand more than we do today. So research is going to be really, really important to the sector. We've just released a report on the implications of climate change on the aquaculture sector in the UK. You can find that report on our website. It's a sister report really to the report we did a couple of years ago looking at the implications for the wild capture sector. So both of these and a host of other research projects are going to need to be underway so that people can understand what it is they're going to be looking at from a business perspective. What changes will they need to be making to their businesses? What changes can they expect? What do they need to accommodate in terms of investment going forward? I hope what I've shown you today is that business is already mobilising. The impacts are already apparent for business, and the desire to do their bit is also upon us. And so a lot of positive news to report on that front. At Seafish, our job is to support the sector to make those positive changes. And as we go forward, we'll be supporting in lots of different ways. I just wanted to shine a light on a few of those areas where Seafish will be providing support to businesses in the UK. In the short term, I talked earlier about the awareness raising campaign. I think this is important. It's important that the sector has a voice and the sector can describe the changes it is making so that when it is called upon to do so, it can come across in a very positive way. So our digital campaign is about shining a light on those positive experiences. In the longer term, I think we'll be working on more of those research projects. I think we'll be working alongside businesses to help them with those adaptations and mitigations. I think it's about bringing people together. The solutions that one business find may well be specific to that business, but the issues are likely to transcend across the sectors and throughout the supply chain. So I think working together, publishing key findings, shining a light on good practice is all part of the role that Seafish can perform. So one of the tools that Seafish has made available previously, and we are going to be upgrading, is our CO2 emissions profiling tool. You may be familiar with this, you may have used this, it's on our website, anyone can use it, free to access. It was developed originally, again a Norwegian connection here, with Sintef, but also with Dalhousie University in Canada, and our experts at Seafish. The purpose of the original tool was for users to be able to calculate the carbon emissions from any given supply chain. It was really focused on the wild capture sector. The new model is going to include aquaculture for the first time, so that businesses can, if they are sourcing from aquaculture sources, they will be able to calculate their carbon footprint. I think this tool is going to help build understanding. It's going to help you identify emissions hotspots in your supply chain. And it will also help you communicate your carbon credentials to your consumers if you wanted to. So look out for that. It's coming through later in 2022, and we'll be communicating that when it's available. That's the new carbon emissions tool. And finally, we will also be looking at busting some popular climate change myths. There's all sorts of nonsense produced by the media and by some of the environmental NGOs, I'm afraid to say. And some of those myths are up on the screen at the moment. Stopping fishing is good, banning trawling is the way forward, banning intensive reduction fisheries is good, cutting meat protein from your diet. All of these things we are going to take a proper look at, a scientific look at, and we're going to research these issues and provide the facts and the data that we, and hopefully you as our partners in the seafood supply chain, can use to refute and play down some of these dangerous and misleading myths and legends that are promulgated in the media. So look out for some of that as well. We're going to be working with other partners around the world to make sure that those facts and statistics are accurate and correct. And thank you, Hans, and the Norwegian Seafood Council once again for inviting Seafish to be a part of your day today. I've enjoyed being here. I hope next year that we can all gather again in person, perhaps in Fishmongers Hall or some other venue in London, and we can all get together once again and share in our thoughts and our research on the seafood sector. So thank you very much again for the invite. I look forward to seeing you again shortly.
Here in the United Kingdom, we see that the plant-based sector is emerging quite fast, and they are very successful on their communications with the consumers, also on the topic on sustainability. We have asked Claire Roper from one of the more successful plant-based brands here in the UK, Corn, to give their views on how they are communicating with the consumers to change consumer behavior.
I'd just like to start by introducing myself. I'm Claire Roper. I work for Corn Foods currently as Head of Marketing and Innovation. I've been in food for over 15 years now, probably a little bit longer than I'd like to admit, and it's really a big passion of mine. And I now lead the marketing side and innovation side of our food service division here at Corn. So really focusing on every sector that is out of home in terms of eating out, education, workplaces, etc. So today I'm just going to talk through Corn, a little bit about who we are, what we stand for, our ambitions, and also talk you through some of the ways we approach food service and how we really encourage everybody to eat a plant-based diet and how easy it can be to include on menus, and equally how delicious the dishes themselves can be. So our purpose here at Corn Professionals, our food service division, is really about inspiring chefs with a protein with purpose. We're really passionate about making a change in the world, and we really want to show today how the food service sector can help drive a healthy and more sustainable choices without compromising on the taste and deliciousness of dishes. So just to start a little bit around who we are here at Corn and what are our ambitions. So really, we are focusing in on reducing our environmental impacts at the moment. It's very topical and very important. We've all seen the carbon clock ticking in terms of the impact we need to make on our planet to make sure that there's a future for generations to come. And so for us, we really strongly believe in having a net positive business by 2030. And to do that, we're really promoting plant-based by inspiring chefs to really use a different meat-free protein. As the pioneers of meat-free, we believe that we really do have a strong role in doing this from the front. We also need to look after ourselves as well as the planet, and the nutrition, health and well-being side of our protein is also really important to us, and how we can really showcase that it's a complete source of protein, no cholesterol, and has high in fibre and low in fat, all things that are important for our bodies to work well and to give us a good basis for the future. We've been around a long time, way longer than I've been here, and we have a really good and credible history around the meat-free protein that we have and the claims that we can make. So we are the brand leader still here at Corn, and we have that trusted quality with consumers. So by putting it on the menu, you really are encouraging people to taste something that they know and love and know will deliver something good. We've got a proven track record as well. So we've got a range of versatile products, which really helps when you're trying to create a menu, because it's really important to create a number of dishes for people. It's not something people necessarily are just doing once or twice. This is something that they want to do all the time. So therefore, it's important for them to make sure they've got a good number of choices. Our focus recently has really been on how we can help with solutions as well. It's a difficult world right now with lots of different pressures from different areas, particularly in the hospitality industry, but also across education and workplaces. And therefore, for us, it's really important about how we can work together in the industry to give solutions and not just sell people a bag of product. We were the first global brand to achieve third-party co-education of our carbon footprint figures. And the reason that this is important is not just because it gives a credible carbon figure for the product, but also because it makes sure we show that we have a real commitment to reducing that carbon. So it's not just about having the carbon figure, but actually by reducing our processes and our production and the way we approach things year after year, we are focusing on reducing that carbon figure as well. So this is something that's a progression, not just a static thing. As I've talked about, it's really important, and we're very passionate about sustainability. And actually, Corn's mycoprotein, the heart of what our product is made for, is better for the environment. It's known as what's vertical farming because it uses less water and produces fewer greenhouse gases and essentially takes up less land. We are able to really showcase that you can produce something delicious without having a massive impact on the planet. But let's not forget, we always do something with food. So ultimately, it really does need to taste delicious. And therefore, that for us is really important. And we want to make sure that we can deliver on the taste and texture of dishes people love. And also, we want to make sure we add that element of health. And it comes with something that tastes delicious, and therefore is something more likely that people will buy into. For those that don't know, and I'm not sure how many of you there are, but corn products are powered by something called mycoprotein. This is a very natural product that comes from a fusarium in the ground, and it allows us to make this great tasting product with texture. Ultimately, it uses a really old and a natural process of fermentation that you would see in many other products on the market, bread, yogurt, etc. So there's an element of process, but not the scary process that sometimes people believe with food like this. And for us, that mycoprotein fermentation is essential for creating the product. It grows in containers up in the northeast of England, so we're a British grain product too. And this really creates a vertical farming approach, as I've mentioned before. And it really is a great example of a sustainable and nutritious protein source for a growing population. And that's really where it started, was an idea from a scientist around how we create something that can help feed a planet that may run out of food. If you go onto our YouTube website under corn, you will find this video where there's a skill here. And you can really, if you go and look at that video, it really helps really bring to life how our process works and also the relationship that we have with nature as well. So just to say that, it's probably something that many of you know, but eating less meat is here to stay. It's not just a passing fad. It's now a behavior, not a trend. With over 50% of any population looking to actively do something, it's definitely something that happens all the time. So therefore, it's something that we really need to focus on when we're looking at menus, when we're looking at providing food within the food service sector. And actually sustainability, particularly over the last 6 months, has really grown to be a key driver behind eating less meat, alongside health, which traditionally has always been the reason most people bought into meat-free. So it's really important that we focus in on both of those areas when we're looking at what we're offering from a solution perspective. And equally important, with 43% of consumers saying that when it comes to eating out in particular, and that's not necessarily just in restaurants and pubs, etc., but can also be at workplaces, in universities, a lack of imagination when it comes to meat-free dishes is a key frustration and barrier. So there's an attitude really out here of people really wanting to buy into meat-free. What's important now is that we make sure it's something that they find equally as delicious as the diets they had before. And that really follows on with the fact that the majority of people that are moving to meat-free are what marketing would call them flexitarians. I doubt anyone themselves would refer to it like that, but really it's the desire to stop eating meat as often and to reduce the amount of meat that they are consuming. But that comes from a place where meat and the enjoyment of meat and those dishes are very prominent for people and often have emotional connections. So therefore, taste and enjoyment rates very highly when it comes to what people want to see from a delivery in a meat-free world. So therefore, we need to make sure that this is something that we offer. We're in a great place here at Quorn with a 95% brand awareness that people know our product, know what it can deliver, and therefore we can make sure that we meet that trust and quality. We've been doing some recent research amongst these people, so those we would class as flexitarian or looking to reduce meat in their diets. And from our consumer insight, there are kind of really 5 areas that insights you need to act upon. Particularly the main one is around needing meat-free dishes on your menu. This is no longer something that is just a tick box, it's just something we need to do. But you really need those on a menu, whichever sector of food service you're looking at, because it will be a key driver for some people to come and choose your outlet or to choose to eat at university rather than go and find somewhere else, or choose the restaurant or choose the place or come and eat where you're serving this food. Because almost 40% of them are eating meat-free when they're eating out and when they're not at home. So therefore you can just see how important it is to have this and actually what a driver it can be to a menu. So actually it's now something that can actually actively encourage people to come and eat at your establishment. And we are demanding more. Consumers are always demanding, and it doesn't stop here when it comes to meat-free either. So in pursuit of this more sustainable lifestyle and choice of restaurants for eating out, it really can be an important factor. So actually showcasing that you offer these is equally as important as actually having them on menu. And it's also important to start showcasing what your environmental and sustainability practices are as well. As we've seen, it's a key driver in meat-free and therefore really important to showcase as well. And, local and British is still an important trend, something that's been around in food for a long time, but showing that it's sourced sustainably and has an element of local and potentially in this country, British, is also important. As we've talked about, there's a renewed interest in sustainability in the last 6 months, and this is driving people to look for things like carbon footprinting. Whilst there's still education to do on this, and not necessarily everybody understands always the impact, we all know that we need to reduce the amount of carbon that we consume and produce. And actually, it's becoming a key driver to loyalty and footfall as well. So really tapping into this mindset of the consumer can really help whichever area of the world you are servicing. Around 48% of people really value a restaurant, but in particular demonstrating its carbon footprint, but this can be translated to a university, to a school, to a workplace as well. And showcasing it's not just about the carbon, there's also a number of elements. As with a lot of things, it's not just always one dimensional, using sustainable packaging, reducing your waste, and committing to ethical work practices are also important. It's a great time at the moment with a number of different solutions around food waste to really look at that as well. So how we can showcase seasonality, also using potentially vegetables and fruit that may be going out or have just been over-ordered, and also focusing on how we use all of something, not just one part of it. These are all going to be key also to reducing the carbon footprint. So they're not only important that they're something consumers are looking for, but they're also important in the strive to make carbon production as low as possible. So realistically, we know that it's a market that is demanding meat-free menus. We know that consumers want more. We know that they want delicious dishes, but also an element of responsibility when it comes to the planet as well. So in terms of how Quorn approaches this, what we've developed is a number of different ways to communicate and showcase across the industry and support so that this becomes a community way of achieving our goals. Saving the planet, reducing our meat consumption is something that's close to a lot of people's hearts. So it's just a way of showcasing the solutions on how we can achieve this. One of that is that word solutions, really. So really showcasing on how we show it's a solution, not just a product. One way is really working within the industry itself and looking at how we can create delicious dishes that maybe sometimes will surprise people when it comes to meat-free. So we're very lucky here to have two brand ambassadors that we work with in the industry. Chantal Nicholson, who in the UK used to own Treadwell's, a prominent British restaurant, and is about to open a new restaurant this year with a focus on seasonality and sustainability. And Kirk Howarth, who has a long-term passion around the health benefits of reducing the amount of meat and dairy and showcasing delicious and high-standard food. So for us, it's really about how we hold masterclasses across the industry to really showcase how dishes can be brought to life. And then actually that meat-free can be used as an ingredient, as a texture within the dish, not just necessarily putting the product on the plate, but actually how we can work with its incredible ability to take on flavor in the form of Quorn, and how you can create that texture using those chef techniques that people know. So really inspiring people, and you can see there's a photography of a live one we did with a contract caterer recently that really helped inspire people and is at the heart of their plant-based offering now. It's also important to encourage people to take part and really sort of put some behavior behind the trends as well. So encourage people to make active swaps. And that's what we really focus on here, is in education in particular, is how we show it's really easy to make a meat-free choice. So you just have to swap it. So a recent campaign we have done that started in Veganuary and will continue this year is focusing on Swap It. And this is really showcasing how you can just make one easy swap a week, change your meal to something that is meat-free, and really make a difference when it comes to carbon. What's really great about Quorn is that because we have this certification, we can show what the impact of that swap can be. So how many showers you've saved, or how many miles in the school bus you've saved, or power to drive a computer. This really makes it tangible for people to understand the impact of their behaviour. We also noticed in education and in universities that potentially meat-free was not always the dishes that people wanted to eat. So it often bypassed some of the food trends and was not necessarily the food of choice. So we've created a number of concepts that work across secondary and higher education that allow schools and universities to offer something to pupils that will really tantalise their taste buds. A little bit of a difficult one to say. And one of the key things for us is a concept called Green Street Kitchen, inspired by the High Street. We all know that people here in the UK love a little bit of the fast food and some of the things they see when they're eating out, from Wagamama's to McDonald's to Greggs. So we've really pulled together a number of concepts that are inspired by that eating, the informality of it, and the deliciousness that we know they can have. And that for us is really key at secondary school when people are starting to make their own choices about food. So it's important to give them something delicious. We've also developed a concept called the Conscious Cantina, always seemingly also difficult to say, the Conscious Cantina, which is designed to kick up the consciousness for the love of taste and the planet. This really focuses in, again, on the street food trend, so harnessing those food trends that are around and bringing it to life when it comes to meat-free. Giving a really lift and launch option to universities to create a concept that they can offer to their students, be it in physicality or even on apps, etc., as that increased demand for ordering online keeps going as well. This is a really versatile concept which can be used in both ways. Obviously in the industry, and there's been a lot of focus in the press around training and support when it comes to hospitality. It's a difficult time to encourage people to be part of this industry, particularly in the kind of restaurant and eating out area, but really across the board, with people having spent a lot of the pandemic with different jobs and therefore have found a different balance in their life or decided that hospitality and food service is not necessarily the place for them. On the other side as well, there's also been a distinct lack of formal training when it comes to meat-free and plant-based cookery. A lot of the traditional courses don't offer this as a set part of the course, and therefore often people can go through these courses with not necessarily understanding how some of their skills can translate into this industry, which is immensely important as time progresses, when this will become a massive part of every menu and a really big focus. And therefore for us, it was really important to work within the industry to inspire chefs, not just at every level, but also those coming into it, and provide that training and support. So we've partnered with HIT Training in the UK with a hope to move that around the world to be the first plant-based course across the industry for chefs all across the food as a service industry and at all levels. There's modules for all elements, including sauces and stocks, etc., and a key focus on corn and how it can be used on menu and its great role it can play as an ingredient. So again, to show to chefs that they can use those skills that they're learning across the meat-free and plant-based world as well. We've been long-term supporters with the Craft Guild of the Young National Chef Awards as well. It's a really exciting competition where you can really see some of the young talent entering the UK and also the passion that they have for meat-free and plant-based cookery. So it's important for us to be a key part of that and really be a sponsor, and not just a sponsor, but an active sponsor who can really showcase how meat-free can come to life and how they, again, can use those skills and the flavors and the ingredients that they want to use to bring meat-free to life. In this world, there's a number of different ways you can absorb information almost daily at the moment. So for us, again, it's about utilizing those to encourage debate across the industry. It's important to bring people together, to understand some of their barriers, to understand their feelings and some of the ways that they'd like to look at meat-free. So for us, we've looked at different ways we can do this, from podcasts with Footprint focusing on sustainability, to engagement with campaigns with the public sector catering in the UK with 20% less but better meat, and also in debates and roundtables, again across public sector, but also in a number of areas, hosting webinars, etc., where we can showcase different insight, exactly like today, in terms of the industry and industry experts, and really encourage that debate and get to solutions that we can all benefit from for both the planet and our own health. We've also been focusing on how do we help people create menus and also create ranges for food service. When you have a business that operates across both the retail and food service side of the world, it is important to look at how you meet the needs of both. And for us, there was a real need to create a distinctive brand and operation within the chicken, which is something that Quorn replicates very well and has done very well with launches for KFC, for example. And for us, it was important to showcase how very easy to lift and launch a very popular trend in fried chicken could be. So this was really about us creating a brand and menu that people could lift and launch, whether it's in a university or it's within a restaurant, that really reflects what people like to eat. So focusing on the burger, the fillet and some wings. This for us was about showcasing the great way that food can look for food service, but also how easy it can be to launch something within your own menu. So thank you all very much today for your time. I'm sorry that it's not been in person, but I'm sure those days are to come. And I wish you a very good day and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thank you.
When it comes to sustainability, it's very important for us as seafood exporters to the United Kingdom to get some views from our buyers, the importers and the retailers, on what their expectancies are on sustainability today, but also for the future. So I'm very happy that Cameron Moffat, the head of social responsibility in Young Seafood, the largest seafood company in the United Kingdom, has said yes to give their views on the expectancies from them and from the retailers on this matter on sustainability.
Good morning, good afternoon or good evening to those watching this webinar. My name is Cameron Moffat and I'm the Sustainability Manager for Young Seafood. And today I'll be sharing some insights on sustainability with a particular focus on the UK retail expectancy to the fishing industry to deliver sustainable seafood to consumers. Whilst COVID-19 still dominated most media outlets in 2021, its only challenger for ubiquity were climate-related stories in the media. From the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere reaching 150% of pre-industrial levels, to severe weather events linked to climate change causing misery for millions globally. For me, 2021 was the year that climate change finally went mainstream. 2021 also saw the UN Climate Change Conference COP26, which saw 100,000 protesters take the streets of Glasgow as world leaders and their delegations negotiated an approach to reduce our impact and limit anthropogenic change. 2021 was also the year that the seafood industry went mainstream. I'm sure by now many of you have seen Netflix's slickly produced documentary Seaspiracy on the global seafood industry that reached the top of the many national most watched lists in May and June. From my point of view as a sustainability manager, Seaspiracy was a particularly frustrating show to watch. It had the potential for an open, honest review of the challenges we face in the seafood industry, but sadly this was not forthcoming and it took a sensationalist approach. Whilst this programme's content has been heavily rebutted by NGOs, academia and industry alike for some of its inaccuracies and flawed science, the damage sadly may have already been done. So where does this leave seafood consumers? In short, shows like Seaspiracy and the increasing negative coverage of fisheries and aquaculture in the media has likely damaged consumer confidence in seafood. Whilst the consumer spend and consumption data seems to show there's been no significant short-term impact on seafood, it remains to be seen what the implications could be longer term, particularly in the seafood consumers of tomorrow. Millennials and Gen Z, who are potentially already more likely to go vegetarian and now during veganuary vegan, may be more likely to switch off seafood due to this type of exposure. Over the past 5 years, we've seen some interesting trends in frozen and chilled seafood within the UK retail sector. Chilled volume sales have seen a steady year-on-year increase, particularly driven by farm salmon, whilst frozen has seen a reversal in its decline due to the UK lockdowns and the temporary closure of many food service outlets. While frozen has begun to decline again in 2021, what is yet to be seen is its potential for a stronger residual frozen market in the wake of the pandemic. So what does this mean for sustainability and consumer recognition of eco-labelling on pack? Well, from the MSC's GlobeScan research that was undertaken in 2020, the UK sits just below the global average, with recognition of the label at 44%. This level of recognition is on the increase, however, only a 2-point change from 2018 to 2020. MSC have, however, made significant increases in a number of European countries, as well as China, contributing to an overall 6-point increase globally. To improve their recognition in the UK, MSC have heavily invested in marketing over the last few years, with a number of out-of-home campaigns, including the All Hands on Deck campaign, and successful Sustainable Seafood Weeks taking place in September over the last 2 years. But I think what's almost more important for the MSC than recognition is trust in the label. Between 2018 and 2020, this continued to grow in many key commercial countries, including the UK, where trust sits at 75%, just 1 point below the global average. With the next set of GlobeScan results set to be released this year, what we're likely to see, however, is a sharp increase in recognition through their marketing efforts, as well as their portrayal in Seaspiracy, but also the potential for a weakening in trust in the label for the same reasons. Where we used to see NGOs scale corporate HQs to protest perceived injustices on sustainability, we've now seen a shift into a more collaborative corporate partnership approach. The most recent example of this, and the most relevant to the seafood sector, is the WWF basket. At COP26 late last year, 5 major UK retailers signed up to halving their impact on the environment by 2030. This basket approach covers 7 priority areas, including climate, diets, marine and packaging. It operates in a format by which retailers are publicly assessed against their progress on each outcome measure. Whilst this basket approach focuses on retailers, there will certainly be implications for the entire supply chain and its participation in it. Whilst nearly all the priority areas in the basket have some implications for the seafood supply chain, unsurprisingly the focus of this presentation will be on the marine indicators. As you can see from this slide, the 3 progress measures the UK retailers will be expected to report against are the percentage of certified raw material, the percentage of adherence to the WWF Seascape approach, and the percentage of farm product with a forage fish dependency ratio less than 1. These measures themselves have some interesting implications, but what I'd like to do is look at the detail behind them. This slide shows you the level of detail that sits behind the progress measures. I won't spend too long here, but what I'd like to point out is the volume of action that is required within the supply chain, as highlighted in red. So let's take a look at the minimum requirements. The first of which is that all raw materials should be covered by an ecological, ethical and animal welfare third-party certification scheme. When we look at the implications of this, it becomes clear that MSC will no longer be a single tick box to supply. It also means some uncertainty for the applicability of fishery improvement projects to the UK retail space beyond 2030, and WWF still have not clarified their position on this. On ethical, the Responsible Fishing Vessel Scheme is going to become increasingly important for UK retailers looking to demonstrate best practice, but some may wish to go further. Finally, whilst there's no animal welfare certification standard currently, there is a growing movement in the NGO space to level the playing field in humane slaughter between wild capture fisheries and aquaculture operations, where stunning is a standard practice. The second requirement surrounds only sourcing raw material with no conditions or good progress to closing conditions under these certificates. This requirement is a huge step change that requires far more scrutiny of fishery surveillance reports and opens up the question of whom should be reporting on the progress of these conditions, the client group or the standard holder. Within the Seascape approach, there's also a more direct focus on spawning stock biomass and fishing pressure, particularly because of challenges within tuna fisheries. When we look at 2 key whitefish stocks in the Northeast Arctic, we can see that on the whole, stringent management processes over the last 20 years have allowed for the stocks to remain productive while staying economically viable. As you can see from the graphs, the remarkable period of high spawning stock biomass is now falling back to more historic levels, and this is where the challenges of fishing pressure could potentially occur. Whilst both stocks' 95% confidence levels sit close to or just over FMSY, if the fishery were to be strict to FMSY, it would mean a fairly significant reduction in the quota of both stocks. The UK market expectations on social is a rapidly evolving space. Within the WWF basket, there's a recommendation that businesses adopt both PAS 1550 and certify fishing operations to the Responsible Fishing Vessel Standard. To support this, the UK retailers and processors have been working via the Seafood Ethics Action Alliance, a collaborative forum formed in 2018 to agree best practice and respond to the ethical issues in the supply chain. The Sea Alliance has been particularly focused on the operability of the PAS 1550 Code of Practice and producing a risk assessment to enhance due diligence and provide a common reference for buyers to engage with the supply chain. Seafood generally has a positive story when it comes to its carbon footprint. From a Norwegian perspective, species like cod, haddock, the pelagics and farmed salmon all perform well against chicken and red meat. As seen in some of my earliest slides, climate change is at the forefront of consumer minds, and so to remain competitive, seafood must also transition to net zero. By breaking down some of the barriers that exist in trust to provide robust continuous data on areas such as fuel usage and processing, we will be able to better understand a pathway to carbon efficient fishing. Retailers are increasingly looking to make their supply chains more transparent and improve traceability through digitisation. Globally, there is a lack of consistency and quality in the key data elements collected through catch certificates and legislative requirements. The GDST, an industry-endorsed traceability standard, enables a common approach to these KDEs and allows for an interoperable IT architecture to be built to support its transfer. As more comprehensive and verifiable data becomes available, it will allow for brands and retailers to improve the information that can be provided through transparency initiatives, such as the Ocean Disclosure Project. We're increasingly seeing that some key decisions that influence the sustainability of fisheries cannot be actioned by the client groups themselves, but rather the governments that manage the fisheries. This has led to the foundation of a new form of fishery improvement project, one based on advocacy rather than ecological improvements. Brands, retailers and food service are working together to highlight the need for governments to agree on management processes of shared stocks to end unilateral quota increases. Through market leverage and highlighting the potential implications of inaction, these FIPs aim to drive improvements in the fisheries and regain certification. Before rounding up, I'd like to touch on the fact that sustainability is a rapidly evolving area. We're always looking ahead to the expectations of future consumers to keep seafood competitive with other proteins. Leadership in areas such as carbon and biodiversity, remote electronic monitoring, worker voice mechanisms and gear innovation would certainly be big steps in keeping eco-conscious consumers engaged. In conclusion, over the next 8 years, we're going to see a large step change in sustainability requirements and the requests for public reporting. I think seafood is well placed as a tasty, nutritious and potentially low impact protein for an increasingly conscious consumer. And finally, UK and Norwegian businesses could certainly benefit from increased cooperation and aligned views on best practice. Thank you.
Recently, there has been some issues around the sustainability and the MSC certification for Norwegian fjord, cod and haddock. We have asked Torbjørn Larsen from the Norwegian Fishermen's Organization to give their views and a roadmap on how the Norwegian fisheries industry are working to regain the MSC certification on these two important species for Norwegian fisheries.
Hello there. My name is Tor Larsen, and I'm a senior advisor at the Norwegian Fishermen's Association. And I guess I'm sad but not too surprised that I'm meeting you all in a digital format instead of in London. So what I'll try to do here today is to give you a very brief background to the status and the future prospects of the MSC certifications of Norwegian cod and haddock. So I'll start off by trying to share my presentation with you. See, that looks promising. And the Norwegian Fishermen's Association, or the NFA, is the organization that represents basically the entire Norwegian fishing fleet, from the small single-man vessels to the large offshore trawlers. And among many other things, we are also the organization that has the responsibility for all the Norwegian MSC certifications, and I am the lucky person tasked with taking care of those. And to kind of understand why we are where we are with cod and haddock right now, we have to understand the basics of the issue of coastal cod in Norway, which is a very long-standing challenge in Norwegian fisheries management. So the first thing is that, you know, we have a lot of cod in Norway, and especially in northern Norway, and all of that is of the same species, Gadus morhua. But we have defined them into different subpopulations. And the most famous population of that is the northeast Arctic cod, which lives has a lot of its feeding far out into the Barents Sea, but comes into the northern Norwegian coast to spawn in the winter. But then we have a subcomponent which we call the coastal cod, which is probably not one stock or three stocks for that matter, but actually a complex of many different stocks living in individual fjords and also making, migrating, a little bit further out, from the Norwegian coast. But for simplicity, that is now divided into three stocks. And the unfortunate thing about the coastal cod is that is now has been classified for more or less the last 20 years as below the desirable population thresholds in the ICES advice. And this has been taken into account in all the MSC certifications we've had until now. Norwegian cod and haddock, when it was first MSC certified in 2010-11 and then reassessed in 2015, basically de facto had conditions related to coastal cod. And the thing is that you cannot catch Northeast Arctic cod from the world's biggest cod population without also having, at least not with the small scale vessels close to shore. You can't do that without catching some degree of coastal cod as well. So it's an unavoidable bycatch. And these stocks are not, they may look simple on paper, but they're not in the real world. So there's probably a significant overlap and interplay between the different coastal cod stocks and between the coastal cod stocks and the Northeast Arctic cod stocks. So how did we get there? Well, the MSC situation where we have now, where we have paused or non-active certificates for inshore cod and haddock. It's important for me to convey that there's no negative, basically, on the water changes since the first assessment points in 2011 and 2015. Or maybe even back to 1997 for that matter. If you look at the spawning stock biomass from the ICES reports in both 2014 and 2021, you have basically a very stable situation with coastal cod after a large drop-off in the late 90s, and this is, as I'll explain more later on, this is something that is taken into account by the Institute of Marine Research and by ICES, and that there's now a significant revision of the science behind the coastal cod stocks in Norway. And with the de facto conditions that have been placed on coastal cod, basically since 2011 in the Norwegian MSC assessments, we have had some very real regulations in place since 2003, which were intensified with the coastal cod rebuilding plan, which was implemented in 2011, with the fjord lines, restricted access to larger vessels, real-time closures in the Henningsvær area, and there's been a lot of regulatory measures in place in Norwegian fisheries to limit the catches of coastal cod and increase the population biomass in the assessments. Now, unfortunately, that has not yielded the desired results, at least not in terms of what we have been able to see in the ICES advice and the acoustic service for cod. The coastal cod stock has been at a very stable level, and at that level, which is still deemed to be too low. And the status today is that we have had a reassessment last year of the offshore cod and haddock, and we have a reassessment of the inshore cod and haddock, which is ongoing, but is on a pause right now, because there is a great deal of uncertainty about the science behind coastal cod, and we are now waiting for a revision in the scientific data from the ICES and the Institute of Marine Research, which is now ongoing. So there is a split on 12 nautical miles, which is in effect and will be in effect throughout the season, unfortunately, where we have an MSC certificate for all fish outside of 12 nautical miles, while cod and haddock caught inshore, where there is a larger degree of coastal cod bycatch, is still on a pause in the reassessment. So what is the root problem behind this? I think there's a question if this is a scientific problem or a management problem or simply a problem with overfishing. Because at least we tend to believe that the problem mainly lies within the two former areas. The level of catches of coastal cod for the last 20 years has been too high, according to ICES advice, but still there is a lack of response to this overfishing. Simply put, the stocks should be at a lot lower level now as a result, if the scientific basis was correct. And the Fishermen's Association has also done a scientific study using density models, comparing the Norwegian coastal cod stocks to basically all other Atlantic cod stocks around the Northeast Atlantic, and we have found that the density expectations with the reference points that are set for this stock are actually ranging from 2 times that of other stocks, which is the Icelandic, to 27 times of the density expectations of other cod stocks. In other words, we have set the bar for ourselves, or the scientists have set the bar for where we want the Norwegian coastal cod stock to be in order to be regarded as sustainable. We've set that perhaps unrealistically high. And that is something that I believe, at least, the scientific community has started to realize after 20-something years on running more or less on autopilot with this issue. And it's been confirmed that there is an ongoing revision of the science and the reference points in ICES and the Institute of Marine Research. So what we are expecting to emerge now in the time to come is a revision of the reference points and a new rebuilding plan for the coastal cod, if that is needed. And the timeline for this is that we expect to see results from the scientific community by June of this year. The Institute of Marine Research has said that they wish to give advice for the 2023 season according to a new reference points and a new rebuilding plan. And we believe and we hope that this new information that will come out of this will allow a reassessment of the inshore cod and haddock in the year to come in some capacity. And it is still within grasp for us to have a certificate reinstated by the next winter season, the 2023 season. So what we see here is that this is something that is being resolved mainly with work in the scientific community, with a high degree of input from us as the fishery client. But there is it's also important to stress that there are no quick fixes to this. This is something that has to be done in the time that it takes and by the relevant authorities. The most important thing here is that the best available science will be as good as possible. And I think it's important to keep in mind here that this is a certificate that is now non-active, not because of negative change in fishing practices, but in our opinion, at least, due to a lack of change in the science behind the stock, and that we have more or less defined ourselves into this problem by making these high granular, taking this high granular, high definition approach to the stock assessments, defining these subcomponents. I think there is some degree of punishment for that approach, where in any natural phenomena, the more closely you examine it, the easier it will be to find some sort of issue. I think there is a lot of I'm quite certain to say that most of the uncertainty in the science here in fact points in a positive direction, that the stock situation may be better than we have perceived until now. And I think it's also important for everyone to keep in mind in the upcoming season here that there are other sustainability parameters to keep in mind. For example, this is a small-scale coastal fishery, making the social component quite important, and also it's a fishery with a very favorable carbon footprint. And in the end, I think I'd also like to point out that not purchasing Norwegian cod and haddock in this season will at least not incentivize a quicker reinstatement of the MSC certificates. This incentive from our part, at least as a client, is already 100%. We are very committed to reinstating this certificate as quickly as possible, and we are with the progress that is now being made with science and management, we are very hopeful to have it back soon. So that is a very quick overview. I'm happy to take any questions if you want to send them to me later on. and I hope you have a good conference. Thank you.
To succeed on sustainability, research is very important and one of the key factors. In Norway, we're very lucky that the industry has come together to set up the Seafood Research Fund, which do research on behalf of the whole industry. We have asked Hans Petter Næss, who's the Director of Communications in the Seafood Research Fund, to give us an insight on which key innovations we have on sustainability in the Norwegian seafood industry right now.
My name is Hans Petter Næss. I'm with the Norwegian Seafood Research Fund, and I will take a few minutes of your time to give you a certain insight into the Norwegian seafood industry's efforts into R&D and how that has of importance not only to the growth and profitability and future of our industry, but also when it relates to the environment and sustainability. Me, myself, I am not your researcher or scientist. I am an industry person, having worked 27 years roughly within this industry, among other things, 5 years as a representative in Japan for the seafood industry, and I've been working 10 last years with the Seafood Research Fund. And as an industry person, I have come to realize the great importance that the research and development efforts have on the seafood industry, not only to our industry, but also to our markets, our clients in the markets, and not least when it comes to sustainability. I'll start with the big picture on the national level and comparing the UK and Norway. The horizontal axis in this graph is the point, the percentage of the total GDP within a country that is attributed to R&D. Roughly 2% of the GDP is attributed or invested into R&D in both the UK and Norway. Our ambition as a nation, stated ambition within Norway, is higher. It has for many years been stated as being up to 3%. We are at 2% level, same level as the UK. When it comes to where the R&D investment are, when it comes to Norway, the 10% for the or from or within the seafood industry is much higher than you would find in most industrialized countries. That is a picture of how or symbol of how the importance of the seafood industry is as such with our country, but also the importance of the R&D investment within the sector. Looking at the three parts, fisheries, aquaculture, and marine sciences, you will see that the industry contributes roughly 50% of the R&D investments into fisheries and aquaculture, whereas in the marine sciences, the industry part is much smaller. And that is logical because that has mainly to do with the resource management. And that is the first point I'd like to make, that the importance of the resource management here, symbolized by the Institute of Marine Research, cannot be overestimated by the industry. The fact that we are able, through research, through science, to ensure that we are able to manage our resources, and most of them are joint, UK and Norway, sustainably in the long term is of vital importance. There are enough countries who are not able to do that, so that's I think we must safeguard and cherish also from the industry side. When it comes to the industry's R&D efforts, those are, as we say, all over the place. In aquaculture, in traditional salted dried, in the land industries and in the fisheries. A major part of the industry's efforts is done jointly through us, the Norwegian Seafood Research Fund. What are we? We are industry financed, meaning 0.3% as an R&D levy on the value of exports. We are industry governed, our board and our advisory groups who advise us to where to prioritize R&D efforts are industry representatives, but we are government owned as a natural logical consequence of being financed through a public levy. Why does Norway have this kind of structure? 3 reasons. Why is it accepted within the industry? Number 1, the broad acceptance of R&D as such. Number 2, knowledge, research results within our industry are basically open source open. Number three, the very varied structure. Those three factors lead to the sensible solution that you jointly pool your efforts into R&D in the seafood industry. How do we manage a particular role? Well, number one, we have to adhere to particular laws, being a governmentally owned company. For example, the Public Information Act, which ensures transparency and insights is what we do. On the top there, research, we have to ensure that the independence of science, independence of industry influence is taken care of, is ensured. We do that through how we phrase the standard terms and conditions for each project. Number three, the most important thing, we answer to the industry. We must show value and results to the industry. How do we do this? We anchor our priorities annually within the industry. We execute and handle the R&D project in such a way that on the one hand side, the R&D's independence is ensured. On the other hand, the industry is linked to the project to ensure the value for the industry. And then we put a lot of efforts into communicating results so that results from R&D could be implemented and create value within the industry. We are investing in all areas, aquaculture, pelagic, groundfish, and cross-sector activities, such as, for example, coexistence in the sea areas. I'll start with I'll use some examples here. Now we are 60, 70 meters below surface in the North Sea. This is a Danish seine, and this is one project, but it's an example of several projects where the industry, through us, is investing into R&D to ensure catch control. This particular product has to do with selection of minor fish, small fish, below the standards, and how that is being selected out of the catch. Of course, that is fundamental to making sure that you have an efficient and sustainable bird fisheries. This is a project which is related to haddock. On the left side, you see how all projects are presented on our website. Again, transparency. All projects are presented, how they are organized, who works with them, what are the budgets, what are the aims, and all publications and results there. This is a project aimed at improving how the selection of small-sized haddock is done. If selection is done on the surface and not where the fishery is done below, that creates much more damaged fish, much more dead fish. So from a sustainable point of view, obviously you need to try and develop technologies which ensure that the selection of smaller fish happens below. So this project is aimed at developing that kind of technology, an important factor. From the sea, we go out to the society. The importance of documenting the carbon footprints, documenting environmental factors is another area to be mentioned, where the industry puts a lot of efforts. This is an old report, 2017. That's because this project is an ongoing one, so the next one comes 2022. It is aimed at documenting carbon footprints, documenting sustainability factors relating to the industry. This is important also in driving efforts in reducing carbon footprints in the fisheries. So that's the second major point. One outcome of these kind of projects is, of course, that you are able to show, like this very familiar graph, showing the carbon footprints in the various protein competitors, you could say, to our seafood. So that kind of documentation of sustainability is another area where the seafood industry puts a lot of efforts. A third one I'd mention is from the stakeholder outside point of view. This is Friends of the Earth showing how important they think that food waste is. Again, food waste, an issue that we have to be proactive and address so that it does not become a negative issue. We have to make sure that we handle that. We have defined a project which has been running for a few years and will continue to be running. You see the industry actors involved there. It is aimed, and the Norwegian seafood industry has committed to the national goal of reducing food waste. So it's a commitment from the industry leading to the need for research projects. These kind of projects, they do define food waste, which is very, very important because that is different from the various value chains, and the seafood value chains is particular in such. The project identifies how much food waste. It shows the effect of food waste, both in the financial side and the carbon footprint side. It identifies the causes of food waste, and it shows the way forward as to the progress, meaning we will bring more companies into these efforts, thereby more solid data, and we will report consequently in 2025, 2030, in order to embrace and ensure that we are able to handle the issue of food waste and commit to that, which is part of the UN sustainability goals also. A fourth thing I'd mention is catch handling. Catch control is one thing, catch handling is after it's on board. This picture shows a technology project that we have been financing, which is to develop technology to do quality control without cutting in the fish through spectroscopic technology. What that leads to is, of course, less loss, better quality, of course, ensuring quality to the market, but it also leads to reduced waste. So again, it's a factor of technology, mainly pointed to quality, but it is important relating to sustainability. And then I'll mention regulatory issues. This example here is that relating to the EU market. EU has announced that they will introduce what's called PEFCR, this product environment footprint category rules. That leads to the requirement of products being identified as to their carbon footprints, and also label as to their carbon footprints, to be introduced in 2024. What we have done is to identify a project which let's say lets the seafood industry have a hand on the steering wheel when the structures of how you define and how you calculate that is related to the seafood industry, so that it can be relevant for the seafood industry, and that will be beneficial to both Norwegian and the UK industry. Finally, on the point of transportation, transparency is the right word. Transportation. Transparency is the right word. I'd suggest you have a look at a portal called the Barents Watch. There you see various portals. Sustainability in aquaculture is a result of a product that we have been financing, but Fish Info is an example of updated knowledge on the fishing seafood fleet, or the fishing fleet's activities, and it has led to an increased efficiency and increased effectiveness within the industry, thereby reduce carbon footprint, and thereby increase sustainability. So I recommend have a look at that page. That was a brief glimpse into some factors of the consequences of and efforts of the R&D efforts of the Norwegian industry. Thank you very much for your time.
Once again, we had to meet digital for our annual seafood summit here in London. We do miss the mingling and the chatting with all of you, but hopefully we can meet in person quite soon. At this seafood summit, we've tried to address some of the current issues that's important for both the Norwegian and the British seafood industries, and hopefully that's been interesting for you. We have this year had the extra focus on the issue of sustainability. Sustainability is not only around the annual quotas and the state of the fish stocks. It's a much more wider topic that we need to address. So hopefully this program and with all the speakers we've had around this issue will make us as an industry stronger when we communicate around sustainability, both within the industry but also with those that are the most important for us, the consumers. So everyone, thank you for watching us, and see you soon.